June 22, 1986, Estadio Azteca, Mexico City. The air is thin, the sun is brutal, and 51 minutes into the quarterfinal, Diego Maradona leaps alongside England goalkeeper Peter Shilton. The ball drops between them. Maradona's left fist connects first. The ball floats into the net. The referee points to the center circle. Goal. 100,000 people just watched a man punch a football into a goal with his hand and get away with it. That single touch, a touch that should never have counted, locked football history onto a track it can never leave. But what if the referee had seen it? What if that fist never reached the ball? Most people think the answer is simple. England go through, Argentina go home. Maradona is remembered as a cheat instead of a god. But that answer is nowhere close to the truth. Because removing that 1 second doesn't just change one football match. It unravels 40 years of everything that came after, and almost nobody realizes how deep the fracture runs. To understand what breaks, you have to understand what that goal actually did, not to the scoreline, but to the man who scored it. When the ball crossed the line and the referee didn't blow his whistle, something changed. Maradona had just taken an enormous risk in front of the entire world and gotten away with it. Whether it was relief, confidence, or pure momentum, he suddenly looked unstoppable. For the next few minutes, he played with a freedom that nobody on the pitch could match. For minutes later, he picked up the ball inside his own half, dropped his shoulder past 2 English midfielders, accelerated through a gap that didn't exist, beat 2 more defenders with body feints that violated basic physics, rounded Peter Shilton, and scored what FIFA would later officially name the greatest goal ever scored. The goal of the century. Now football fans treat these 2 goals as opposites. One was a crime, the other was a masterpiece. But they weren't opposites. They were cause and effect. The first goal created the chemical conditions for the second. Maradona didn't dribble past 5 English players because he was the best player in the world. He dribbled past 5 English players because for a few minutes in the Mexican heat, his brain had deleted the concept of failure. He wasn't brave. He was beyond bravery. He literally could not feel doubt. Remove the handball, and the goal of the century almost certainly never happens. Not because Maradona wasn't capable of it. He was, but because the neurological ignition sequence that made it possible disappears. You lose the cheat and the masterpiece in the same breath. And without both, Maradona's legend shrinks. He doesn't vanish from history. He's still brilliant. He's still Diego. But the 4-minute sequence that turned him from a great footballer into a myth, a crime, and a miracle side by side, inseparable, simply ceases to exist. That's the first domino. Now watch what it hits. If the referee spots the handball, it's a free kick to England. No goal. 51st minute, still 0-0, and the English backline has just been handed something more valuable than any tactical advantage: belief. In the real timeline, England's defenders screamed for a foul, were ignored, and spent the rest of the match in psychological freefall. The injustice broke them before the football did. But in our alternate version, the system worked, the referee saw it, justice held, and England's squad, already quietly dangerous, now has proof that the universe is on their side. Bobby Robson's 1986 squad was better than people remember. Gary Lineker was the tournament's top scorer, Glenn Beardsley was inventive, Glenn Hoddle was pulling strings, and the defense, for all its limitations, was organized and stubborn. In a 0-0 match where momentum shifts to England after a disallowed Argentine goal, Lineker has a real chance to do what Lineker always did: find one half chance and bury it. England don't need to be the better team. They just need one moment. And in a match where Argentina's talisman has just been caught cheating, the psychological balance tilts. Say England win. Say they scrape through 1-0 or survive penalties. Now they face Belgium in the semi-final. In the real timeline, Maradona destroyed Belgium with another extraordinary individual performance. 2 more goals, one of them nearly as good as the goal of the century. But in our alternate reality, either Maradona isn't there because Argentina are already on a plane home, or he is there, but playing without the aura that made him invincible. Belgium in 1986 were no pushovers. Jan Selmans, Jan Svensson, Jean-Marie Pfaff, they were a legitimate semi-final team. Without a Maradona operating at God level, that match becomes a genuine contest. And the final? Bobby Robson's England against Franz Beckenbauer's West Germany. Lineker versus Rummenigge. Hoddle versus Matthias. A football-defining match of the 1980s in the Azteca. And whoever wins, the story of that decade changes. But the consequences don't stop when the trophy is lifted. They ripple forward in ways that are almost eerie. In the real world, the hand of God became a wound that never healed in English football. It merged with the still raw grief of the Falklands War, fought just 4 years before the match. For English fans, Maradona's handball wasn't just a refereeing mistake. It was a national humiliation layered on top of a geopolitical grudge. England didn't just lose a football match in 1986. England was robbed. And that robbery became part of the country's footballing identity, a sense that the world was always conspiring against them, that they were destined to be betrayed by referees, by luck, by fate. When England met Argentina again at the 1998 World Cup in St. Etienne, 12 years of accumulated bitterness exploded. David Beckham's petulant kick at Diego Simeone, the red card, the penalty shootout, the devastation. That match wasn't just a round of 16 tie. It was a reckoning, a chance to settle a score that had nothing to do with the 22 players on the pitch. The emotional voltage of that night was powered almost entirely by 1986. Remove the original wound, and 1998 becomes a normal knockout game. Beckham's red card is still foolish, but it's not a national catastrophe stacked on top of an older national catastrophe. The emotional architecture of English football for an entire generation changes. The victim narrative, the siege mentality, the bitter resignation, it all softens. Maybe it never forms at all. And English football, freed from that chip on its shoulder, might develop a completely different character. Now turn to Argentina, and the consequences grow stranger still. For Argentina, the hand of God was never a scandal. It was salvation. A country that had sent young men to die in a freezing war against Britain in 1982, a country ruled by a military dictatorship, a country in economic crisis, watched a kid from Villa Fiorito, one of the poorest neighborhoods in Buenos Aires, punch a ball past the English goalkeeper and felt, for one moment, like they had won something back. Maradona himself said the goal was scored, a little with the head of Maradona and a little with the hand of God. He wasn't apologizing. He was framing it as cosmic justice. That narrative, football as revenge, football as dignity, football as proof that the small and the poor could humiliate the powerful, became the foundation of how Argentina understood itself through sport. It shaped how the nation produced, celebrated, and ultimately crushed its footballers for the next 40 years. Every Argentine number 10 who came after Maradona carried that story. Juan Roman Riquelme carried it. Carlos Tevez carried it. And Lionel Messi carried it heaviest of all. This is where the alternate timeline delivers its cruelest twist. In the real world, Messi spent 20 years being measured against a man who had won a World Cup through an act of God and an act of genius in the same 4 minutes. The standard wasn't just high. It was inhuman. It was religious. And Messi, arguably the most talented footballer who ever lived, spent 4 World Cup campaigns failing to equal it. The tears after the 2014 final, the retirement announcement after losing the 2016 Copa America, the suffocating public sense that he could never be enough. All of it was built on a comparison to a moment that, in our alternate timeline, doesn't exist. Without the hand of God, Maradona is still Argentina's greatest player. But he's a footballer, not a deity. He has no miracle. He has no 4-minute sequence that fused crime and art into something beyond sport. And Messi, quiet, private, relentless Messi, doesn't spend 20 years trying to equal a moment that was never about football in the first place. The burden lifts. The tears dry. The tortured narrative that defined his international career dissolves. Does Messi still win the 2022 World Cup in Qatar? Possibly. But if he does, it doesn't carry the same weight. He's not completing a prophecy. He's not becoming Maradona's successor. He's just winning a football tournament. And somehow, that feels like a loss. And that reveals something unsettling about the sport itself. We want to believe football is decided on the pitch. Talent, tactics, discipline, preparation, measurable things, controllable things. But the hand of God shows that football history is shaped just as powerfully by chaos, by a referee's sight line, by a split-second decision to cheat, by the neurochemistry of a 25-year-old kid whose brain couldn't tell the difference between getting away with murder and becoming invincible. These aren't football variables. They're accidents. And accidents, once they enter the story, never leave. They just compound, year after year, match after match, generation after generation, until nobody remembers that the whole thing started with a fist and a bad angle. 100,000 people were inside the Estadio Azteca that afternoon. Not one of them, not Maradona, not Shilton, not the referee, not the fans, understood what they were really watching. They thought they were watching a quarterfinal. They were watching the moment that would define two countries, two generations of footballers, and the emotional DNA of the sport for the next half-century. The next time you watch a match and a referee gets a call wrong, or a player gets away with something small, a tug of a shirt, a hand in the wrong place, a dive that earns a free kick, remember this. You might be watching the first domino fall, and the last one might not land for 50 years. Football doesn't have a script, but it does have a butterfly. And sometimes, the butterfly has a left fist.